Hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to a quick little discussion-y type of deal here on Unicorn Overlord. So I finally got around to doing a true Zenoiran mode, and basically my whole thought process on this whole thing was that I wanted to see where the kind of complaints were coming from folks that were saying that they were too easy, and if it was too easy, try to find a way to make it a bit more fun for folks out there. So I actually have kind of things to discuss on both of those, so let's kind of get into it here. So first and foremost, what does TZ mode even do? Well, it raises stats, from what I've heard, about 5 to 10% across the board, depending on the context of the unit. It changes the way that Cornash works. So effectively, your hallowed Cornash is replaced with like blessed Cornash or something. Basically, it changes it so that it is a single-use revival item of sorts. We'll get to more of that in just a second, rather than your universal cheat button, as it were. So you can't use it to generate valor points. You got to generate those strictly through fighting. You cannot use it to reset fights or extend the timer. So, effectively, what it does is that it causes you to have to actually play to all of the mechanics of the game. Now, typically, the complaints that I've seen were that this alone was not necessarily enough of a change. So, for the sake of a bit more context here, when I say revive item, basically, if a squad is wiped out, all members in that squad are considered retreated, which is a state in which they basically just cannot be deployed for any reason. They're just kind of basically the same as abducted for all intents and purposes, until you spend corn ashes to go get them back. Now, the thing is, looking at this challenge from a lot of different perspectives, there's a few bits and pieces that I don't see actually mentioned in terms of the actual difficulty changes. I don't think there was an official announcement over what exactly else changes, but I feel like Valor skills are used quite a bit more often. It feels like the AI doesn't have that sort of a half-second delay whenever they're going and adapting to things. So, like, for example, if you put a unit into rest, before on Expert, they would still wander away a little bit and then go chase after them. In this case, it's just like instant, like, I'ma kill that right away kind of a thing, if they are a unit that would actually be able to do so. So anyways, effectively, what I decided to do was try a few different challenge runs, try a few different normal runs and what have you, and just see what the differences were in terms of overall feel. And I found that when it came to let's say a lot of the speedrun strats that were being used on Expert, most of them did not work nearly as consistently as they used to before. That roughly 10% difference did make a bit of a big difference. Actually, one of the things that I haven't mentioned up to this point that is one of the changes here is that damage across the board is increased again about 5 to 10%. Now, I can't tell you exactly what happens where, but I can tell you that it feels like a lot of on-field effects seem to be a bit more intense. So, for example, I have seen cases where a squad of dedicated casters did get one shot by an arrow rain and stuff like that. Whereas back on Expert, they would have basically been able to survive it with a little health and go hiding. Archer squads did seem to still survive with a little bit of health, but in general they seem to be using abilities like that more often, and generally they were a bit more of a threat. So anyways, this was the first of a particular rule set that I was going with that I thought would kind of change the game a decent bit, and it did. And it's basically exactly the kind of spice that I think most folks are looking for with this kind of mode, because having talked to a lot of different folks that were complaining about the difficulty, I was trying to suss out what exactly it was that they were trying to get out of it, because we did have one crowd that I feel will perpetually never be happy, which is the I need a lunatic mode kind of crowd, wherein the challenge specifically that they seem to be looking for is one of just like raising the raw stats of everything to the point where every single encounter requires you to retool your entire party, at which point it would simply just it would become a slog. I mean, that is by intent. That is what a lot of those kinds of difficulty modes typically go for. But to my mind, I don't think that's something that they're ever going to do for this one, simply because its whole design is about keeping things flowing, and that just like basically decides, you know what, forget the game flow. We're just going to go old yeller that shit immediately. So I don't think they're going to do that, but A lot of the challenges around TZ mode are specifically logistical ones. They seem to be going for those little moments where it's trying to play to the strengths of the game itself, namely that it's trying to get you to kind of adapt on the fly, not necessarily because that encounter is impossible, but because you made a mistake, and adapting to your mistakes is a hell of a lot more fun. Now, with that being said, if you understand the hard counters and soft counters and whatever else well enough from your expert run, especially if you went and did the whole full worldwide tour there, found all the different items, found all the different events, got your true ending, all that kind of stuff, then yeah, stuff generally gets a bit easier. So to that end, I wanted to throw a little bit of a challenge idea out there for you that I personally found really changed the game for me here. And that was just basically doing the classic Ironman run. Now, for those that have never done one of these, here's generally why it's used and generally why it works in this context. So let me finish explaining before you immediately start writing out an angry comment, because it happens every time. Anyway, so an Ironman run basically consists of playing through the entire thing. Basically, if at any time you see a game over screen for any reason whatsoever, you delete your save file. Now, on paper, this seems like, well, it just seems like it would be more tedious normal mode. Why would we go for this? Well, the thing is, this game is at its most interesting when stuff goes wrong. And I should probably point out that frankly, in a lot of cases, for some folks, it might make more sense to actually go for just more of a no resets kind of rule. In a lot of cases, what I got from talking with various folks, online, where have you, it seemed like a lot of the kind of difficulty was being circumvented from this particular mode by simply resetting when a lot of particular aspects went wrong. So, like, if a bunch of RNG stuff just didn't go your way and you lost the squad, maybe that person might have just simply restarted the map, or in some cases might have just gone for something else. Now, on the lower end of this, I would say something along the lines of like, well, if you lose a map, maybe just kind of walk away from it for a minute. You can't do that one as your next fight. Now, the reason that I recommend this on the lower end of that particular difficulty spectrum is because it doesn't cause a full reset, but it retains that same ideology of basically going in almost blind, that you're still getting surprised by the ambushes, that realistically there's so many fights in this game that most of them you will not have the ambushes and stuff memorized, and it's when those ambushes actually have a chance to show themselves off that things get interesting. Like, for example, right here was one of those moments where I had run into a case where I just ended up missing how quickly the timer was going, and additionally had underprepared for this particular fight. So we end up winding up with a case where the kind of ace squad there would have been able to secure a win, but due to a lack of one stamina there, it ended up resulting in a loss, and so that particular playthrough was dead. So essentially, this kind of like full Ironman rule set is going to be on the higher end of things for the folks that really want to. That really want to kind of stick with this whole rule set. Now, the reason that it works is that it causes you to stop and think more often. One of the issues that seems to be coming up when folks are finding it a bit too easy is specifically that idea of you already know the counters, you already know the things that you're running into, but you have that safety net of being able to start at the beginning of the fight. So essentially, it doesn't have that different edge of giving you that kind of anxiety of going into the fight itself. If you add enough, add enough stipulations, like let's say you add enough moments where you're not upgrading your units, or you're specifically not using specific types of skills, or just not using items or whatever else, generally you still always kind of always know what's coming, and there's kind of relatively few stakes to just trying out something weird every single time until you eventually get it. There's that feeling of inevitability. What I really like about this particular kind of rule set, especially in a context like this, is that it doesn't diminish your ability to go really wacky with your builds, but it does retain that new thought that something could go wrong at any given moment. Those moments where you have your A squad, they're kicking ass, they're steamrolling things, and then suddenly you miss an ambush somewhere. You don't have a Wind Fairy Charm to go deal with that sudden ambush you missed, so now they are injured. Now your main plan of just going and steamrolling the guy has gone from a sure thing to a they're probably going to fail unless they get back to base and essentially get rebuilt from the pieces they just got chopped into, to suddenly, a moment where you realize, okay, you're maybe going to have one more shot at this according to the timer. You're maybe going to have, one more run at it. How do you get all of your lobies to be able to kind of hold the tide, so to speak, to make this realistic? It just leads to that kind of different mindset whenever going into this challenge here, right? So personally, I feel like that's the thing that people are trying to preserve. That they're looking for that different feeling, that feeling that everything is a threat again. Even again in those cases where you may be steamrolling certain fights. And that's one more thing that I want to consider here, in terms of the kind of steamroll potential, because that one. Okay, so that one I haven't been able to suss out entirely, but I do have a theory, because a lot of the folks that I've seen complaining about the steamroll side of things were also typically not Ogre Battle fans, and for those that are unfamiliar with it, it may seem a little weird as to why there's so many fights that you seem to be intentionally able to steamroll. And a lot of times it's for the sake of set dressing. Like those moments where let's say you show up into a fight, and there's just a boss that's just one quick rush away from being dead, or that's potentially just there doing some weird gimmick. And the thing is, those were never meant to be a challenge in the first place. Usually they are there to clue you into something. They're effectively the same thing as, like, if you're playing Breath of the Wild or something like that, there's like rando goblins or something like that that will run up to, like, let's say, attack you with a stick. Is the stick a threat? No, he's just there to show you, hey, look, if he runs past this campfire, his stick catches fire. Isn't that a neato mechanic? Like, he was never meant to be a threat in and of himself. That's just kind of how that ended up going, you know? So anyways, so essentially playing this with this kind of permadeath rule set here, it does kind of change things in terms of making you stop and think whether you maybe need another backup plan a bit more often. So that's it's generally just something that I would recommend trying here. Like, I know I had those moments where, again, I had a caster squad and I would send them out and it seemed like they were just going to be able to steamroll things until suddenly they walked, due to a swap, they ended up walking slightly too close to a tower that they were staying just out of range of, right? Immediately they end up firing an arrow rain. Immediately they end up taking out that support squad. Now the main attack element is injured. The support element is gone. We lost the extra points to be able to bring out another one, and now we're stuck in a position of having to, at worst, end up just failing that map. At best, end up trying to come up with a completely different route through this fight there, right? Generally, I've found that the timers were generally forgiving enough that you typically had a couple tries on whatever your plan was to be able to make it work, but it does make you stop and think more often, and I think that's the most important part here. That while it does, again, add those general difficulty things that I think end up working perfectly with this particular kind of setup that they've got going on, a permadeath rule set might be just the spice that you're looking for in order to make that TZ mode run, a bit more interesting for you. And honestly, if they had officially implemented it, I feel like it would have fit perfectly. However, one thing I want to point out here, I wouldn't recommend actually asking for them to implement it, because here's the thing. Ironman modes in any single player game, they actually never properly function. This is coming from a guy that loves to Ironman every freaking game I play at some point. So it's one of those things I try every dang time, and basically 100% of the time, if you fiddle around with it, there is a way to break it. It ultimately will be on the honor system anyway. Like, even, let's say, XCOM Enemy Unknown, XCOM 2, War of the Chosen, all them kind of things. Oh, sure, they have an Iron Man mode, and you know what? You might have noticed by the time they got to the latest one there, what the hell was it? Chimera Squad. They finally just said, yeah, look, all your decisions are permanent, but your saves, like, you still have an autosave. Like, we're not even gonna bullshit about this. You know why that is? Because people are just gonna alt F4 the game and then just say they beat it anyway. It's just like the reason that this never works in single player games is because there's no way to make a save system that saves it instantly enough that it manages to, actually retain the whole kind of Iron Man rule set. But at the same time, it's also like if somebody wants to cheese it, they can't make it so strict to the point that it just corrupts your game. Because it's a bit of a thing of like, well, do you accept catastrophic damage to the save file, or do you accept that maybe somebody's Iron Man run might be potentially cheesable? Because it's not a difficult choice to make in that situation. So anyways, if you're wondering why something like that is rarely officially implemented, that would be why. And again, this is something that tends to take a lot of games that seem to be easy on their surface, seem to be easy to optimize, and adds a fun logistical element to this. This is the same thing that I recommended for a good number of years for players that wanted a bit more spice out of Tactics Ogre PSP, because in that game, it was a very similar situation. They had an absolute ton of systems going on. There was so much that you could do, and for the folks that ended up optimizing the fun out of the game, they're like, oh god, it was so easy, you guys, my brain is just like leaking out of my ears, Jesus Christ, I'm such a fucking genius. And it's like, okay, optimization, all well and good, it's an RPG, you're going to be able to do RPG stuff, but the interesting part about it is that it led to this funny situation where I think I ended up changing this icon later, because that one kind of sucked. Anyway, so anyways, it led to this situation where, yeah, like, as soon as somebody figured out that they could combine an admin and a weapon skill, it was just completely over, that unit could potentially become completely untouchable, and the boring part that came out of it was that then somebody would stick to just, like, short bow, anatomy, strengthen, weapon, just their bow skill, and or crossbows, and then it was just, like, ranged weapons plinking at a distance forever. So it just became really boring to potentially play normally if somebody was looking to hyper-optimize all the time. Like, certain games, you just play without necessarily optimizing everything because it's just going to ruin it, right? In that case, though, playing it with an Iron Man rule set where you would never take a retreat, like similar to this one, it had a retreat option, but the idea is that you would never retreat. If your main character died, you were just dead. In this case, actually for a while I thought that they did add a thing that the game would game over if Elaine died. Apparently not. He's fine just being dragged along as a corpse, making decisions the entire time. But what it does create is a situation where you're maybe thinking about stuff a little bit differently, thinking about stocking up items a bit more, thinking about how you can prep a little bit more. Like, for example, in this latest run of this whole thing, you might have noticed earlier we got a bit of a game over because I had essentially underprepared when going to go take on Melisandre, and unfortunately she was a little bit disappointed that we couldn't quite get her off the field, these things will happen. You'll under-prepare for things that you thought you were prepared for. I remembered to do the door, but again, one of the cool things you can do in this game is that you can scout ahead and you can actually fight the things that you're going to fight during the map. You're not going to necessarily see all of it. Like, you're going to see those moments. You're not going to see the full ambushes, but you are going to see, like, okay, there may be hiding some stuff in the woods over here. It might be a different squad. We can get a general sense for how well our units function versus theirs, that kind of thing. So either way, this game has a ton of quality of life stuff to make that stuff feel very good. Even though you're limited to a 5-item limit, there are cases where there's just certain fights that you maybe want to take to make other ones more consistent. Like, for example, taking the swamp before Melisandre, which you should do anyway, but just in order to make sure that you don't have any squads taken out before the big initial push, because you can use the cloak that you get from that map in order to go disable the ballista. Granted, you could also just do that with a fighter or something using Berserk. It's up to you, but again, it's a very open-ended system, and rather than making things so stressful to the point that you have to hyper-optimize and use only specific types of units, going and crunching numbers and all this other bullshit. Instead, the challenge becomes more logistical, and to me, that's a lot more interesting. How you use your units where, rather than, hey, look, I just did the math for like 87 straight hours. I just snorted a few lines of coke, and now I understand the math matrix, and see if we end up going and changing these numbers over here, and we put this shield on this guy, and we combine it over with this item over here, then they can maybe just alpha strike their way through the entire thing, and then the entire thing just becomes entirely an initiative question. which is all well and good if that's what you're going for, but for the ones that wanted to stop and think a bit more, stop and smell the roses, so to speak, this might be just the way for you to go. Also, as always, my phone loves going off as soon as I start this whole thing here. Anyway, so just something to try. It's just when I was going through TZ mode, I had a couple cases where fights had taken random losses or whatever, and there were those moments where I was just looking at one of the old interviews that randomly popped up, where they were talking about the fact that they specifically designed this game for people to try and explore the world, that they weren't necessarily looking to make them suffer at every possible turn, that they wanted people to get invested in how the world works, how the mechanics work, play around with the different systems, use all the different types of units, just kind of puzzle everything out and whatnot. And I feel like this leans a bit better in that particular direction. So anyways, so this was the latest one that I was going through. The first few runs actually didn't end up even clearing Cornea there, just due to random stuff that took me a little bit by surprise there. So, for example, something like using Joseph to go tank your way through the mage fight isn't necessarily as consistent as it was before. And for that matter, it's actually way the hell more difficult early on due to the fact that reinforcements seem to spawn in quite a decent bit faster. So he ends up eventually getting shot down and overwhelmed. In the case of something like going straight for some of the boss units there, or some of the heavier boss units, without a cavalry element, many of your infantry will have a hard time even getting through their regeneration and stuff like that. Which was true to some extent on Expert, but it definitely feels more so here. A lot of towers will immediately hit you with an arrow rain. I mean, the tutorial ones are meant to do that, but some of them will just basically immediately fire when you get there. Which means that your scouts, your birds, things like that, typically have to focus on their speed and timing their movements a good bit more. In terms of the in terms of like the direct one-to-one fights, like whether cavalry are taking on infantry or whatever else, they definitely still do have to, they basically function the same for those particular units, but for all the squishier ones, they seem to have a much harder time in this difficulty. And additionally, again, from what I've seen, they seem to just react a decent bit more often. It just feels like there is more going on. It's subtle at first, but there is stuff going on, and there have been more moments where it feels like they're being a bit trickier, That being said, again, items are basically in the same locations, but you have to respect the timer a good bit more. So, for example, especially cases in Bistorius, you can get, you are completely not clearing that without a way to, for example, abuse Beast Slayer, because there's just going to be those cases where they're sending 100 plus mobs at you. It's like, well, figure out how to get through this tide of meat, because otherwise this ain't happening. So you basically probably will be using swap tricks to even get to the end on time. Or, for example, actually one of the things that immediately comes to mind is the post-game. I wonder how that post-game mob fight is going to work, because that's just a weird situation. Yeah, there's this post-game fight where you can basically recruit everybody that you didn't recruit the first time around, as well as a bunch of hidden characters and stuff, and it's just basically a gauntlet of like 50 plus boss fights in a row. So that's just kind of funny to see. I don't think that's much of a spoiler, considering, honestly, I can't explain what the hell even happened there either. So it's just a thing that happens. It reminded me of, like, if you took the Fire Emblem epilogue chapters, or paralogs, or whatever they were called, and then just like smushed them all in a blender, and they all just like came out in one fight. Let's see. What else? So, oh yeah. So there were other moments, like for example, Flying Knight was one of those ones that I like to cheese early, because you could just basically send Ulchus around the side and just go for the insta-kill. She basically gets rocked if she goes beyond the first tower without support on TZ mode. So she definitely is not consistent at taking the end town by herself. You do actually have to fight that fight. On maps like a Famine, for example, before it was just like give Fran 2 draughts and she's got this. Basically, Fran plus items was just the easiest way to handle it. It's not necessarily that she can't handle it; she's just very unlikely to. And if you end up failing to accomplish it, you end up running into some issues. Now, when I say unlikely to, I mean like every now and then you'll see that they're getting a crit or something, and they'll be able to hit like 75% of their health, right? And if you throw in their drafts or draughts or whatever you prefer to call them, you'll find yourself in a position where they're going to be typically going to about 80% there. Like, it isn't skewing it as much as you would hope that it would. I feel like those items in particular get nerfed quite a bit in this version. It doesn't feel as slidey. Like, it feels like stuff's generally already skewed pretty hard when you start the fight. So, like, let's say this is one of the... I believe this was one of the resets here where we ended up getting completely overwhelmed at self-effacing. So the, what's his face? Och, I think is his name. I don't know. I've gone out of my way for absolutely few good reasons to absolutely execute everybody along the way in these Iron Man runs. Because you know what? If we're not surviving, they can't either. Anyway. So there were a lot of kind of different bits and pieces. Actually, wasn't this a successful one? I'm going to have to take a look at the logo on the units to know if it was the one. It might have been, but I'm not sure. I think this is the one that ended up getting overwhelmed just due to stamina shenanigans. Because, yeah, your stamina stuff can snowball really hard against you. Like, it seems like oftentimes the complaint is that you yourself snowball pretty hard. But, yeah, the AI can similarly snowball you pretty hard here. I mean, doing this Iron Man feels roughly on par with something like XCOM 2 in terms of, like, difficulty to logistics to planning to whatever else. Like, you have, like, in an ideal scenario, you're absolutely steamrolling. You're going and hitting objectives with plenty of time to spare. You're kicking names and taking ass. Wow, that's messed up. Anyway, you know what I mean, though. But like, you're going and doing great. But as soon as that snowball starts to melt a little, that's when the bumps start. So. Anyways, as far as I've seen it, it typically tends to have a lot of issues there. I think this might have been the one where we actually struggled it out. There were probably 7 or so runs on this particular playlist. I don't remember. This one might have been successful because there's plenty of time left on the timer, and if we're sending out Hodrick, yeah, Hodrick's team probably would be able to handle everything up to the bridge. And then as long as Captain Horseman gets a chance to actually rest, we can just basically drag him forward using the other guys. And yeah, we did end up pulling it off there due to a provoke on the tower, preventing the magic support, which let everybody else move forward, which let Horsey take a rest. So yeah, that's how we ended up getting past this. Gotcha. But still, it's like, it was scuffy, but that scuffy play wasn't simply, oh, let's reset and then we'll just do this right. Instead, it was like, okay, we got to play this straight. We're in a position where the run just basically ends if this dies right here, so we have to adapt and make it work anyway, you know? As I was doing in some of the other runs, hiding him in the woods in order to rest. That's actually one of those tricks that I was using quite a bit over the course of this kind of challenge run here. Just hiding in the units to let them rest so that they don't get ambushed as often. A few discoveries, actually, as far as this kind of difficulty goes. For one thing, if you hide units in the woods, if the other units are also in the woods, they still are considered within the same vision. So, like, if they're outside, they won't see them in the trees, but if they are in the trees, they will be able to see them just fine. So make sure that everything is completely clear. That's kind of a no-duh kind of moment, but just, you know, remember that that is a thing. Additionally, it turns out that when you have guest squads, if those guest squads are injured in TZ mode, if the one that ends up getting taken out is the actual commander of the team, there are cases when you end up recruiting a corpse, basically. So, like, that ended up happening with Yana on that previous run. I thought I had left the clip in there. But when we recruited her, she ended up being in a position where her team was attacked by several arrow rains back-to-back. So she was basically knocked to 90%, healed up, and then, again, knocked for 90% damage. It was just the frontliners on her team that ended up surviving. Which actually, as an interesting thing, fighters actually have a bit of an interesting kind of role to play this time around. Seeing as the slightly higher defense and health and stuff like that actually made those teams survive a bit more. Granted, it's not just the fighter that can do that, but the fighters also work pretty darn well, just kind of saving a lot of the casters and such. Just kind of a random observation that I found myself kind of appreciating them a decent bit in this kind of mode. It's basically the reason that I ended up going and making that fighter video, because, like, you know what? These guys are turning out pretty alright. They seem to be doing a pretty okay job. I think this was that dedicated caster squad that ended up getting one shot. I don't remember. I know that I got partway through. I think I got partway through one of the fights, and then it ended up saving in a weird spot, and then the update for Switch finally came in. So it might have been. I don't know. I think this was the map where they ended up getting one shot. But anyway, hopefully the clip made it in. Okay, what was I getting at here? So, okay, so yeah, if it's the commander of the squad that ends up getting taken out, they can actually be hired as already retreated, so you gotta immediately revive them. In terms of getting points back and things like that, generally, it doesn't seem like it would be a crazy amount of effort to get your people back. I think if there's one change that this version did need, or at least could use, I would say probably the divine shards. The actual cost for mining things should probably be doubled, maybe, which does obviously make stuff a bit more difficult, but it just, like, in general, that was one of the few things that I would say, like, yeah, if, considering that you can probably get divine shards and things like that through mining if you're decent at the minigame, while the odds aren't crazy high, you can effectively make a profit while doing it as it stands right now. Seeing as you go in, you sell your iron ore, and you've already made up your costs for going in there in the first place. So effectively, you have an infinite item farm, which is not ideal. So what I think would end up helping with this whole difficulty a decent bit, and making it so that folks generally couldn't go out and cheese stuff as much, would probably be that... that idea of maybe doubling mining costs or something. It does potentially mean that a run could be soft-locked, but, I mean, I don't really feel like that would necessarily soft-lock anything, considering that, you know, you still got sigils and things like that, so you could just raise up new mercenaries. Maybe you would use that money on mining instead. It would give that weird slog that some folks are looking for in that situation. So, let's see. I think, was this... This might have been... Yeah, that looks like the moment that they ended up getting sniped over there. Because, yeah, completely fresh squad. They're about to go get their point. And there it goes. Hello, Rain. Goodbye, new mage squad. I mean, yeah, they were rookies, but still, like... bye. Just freaking nuked. Hold on, I want to find one more clip here, because I know it's dragging on. I'm sorry. Let's see, there was one new reset at some... Why was there another reset? Did they end up getting killed there? I could have sworn that was the one that ended up... Oh, no. That was the one that ended up reaching the castle, and they just got, like, messed right the hell up. So, yeah, no, they, they didn't end up actually reaching it. Yeah, the snowball can go quickly in the other direction into easy mode, that's for sure. So let's see, we ended up restarting again. Is this the right logo? Oh no, I'm pretty sure this one got... No, hang on. It might have been this one. No, let's see, how did this one end up getting taken out? This might have been the one that got stuck. Yeah, this is the one that got completely ruined at self-effacing. That's what it was. They got tired. I was trying to go for the item at the bottom there. And then, yeah, they just ended up getting bogged down by the stupid tower as more and more reinforcements come in. We had taken out the second tower, which gives you a second wave of additional reinforcements, and then just the spawns ended up coming in on top of that. It went pretty poorly. Let's see. So yeah, new run started. Yeah, this is the one. This is the Clive and the Clive and Joseph run. This is the one that's still ongoing at the moment. Just getting into Drakenhold and stuff like that. But yeah, this is the one where we ended up going a bit more kind of Joseph kind of actually being the real leader behind everything kind of situation. Went for Joseph, Clive, and Agent What's-His-Face, I can't remember, that's dodging everything for the front, combined with a few other units later on down the line. But effectively just doing the whole dodge tank plus cab thing. It ended up working out pretty well. This is the one that I ended up kind of doubling down on having a hell of a lot of fighters all over the place, which, again, for one reason or another, ended up holding up pretty darn well. But typically, the focus was just on clearing maps a decent bit faster, getting that hit squad in a decent bit faster. Let's see. Oh yeah, and specifically after that one Melisandre incident, going back and making sure to fight all of the random stuff in the swamp to make sure that I wasn't overlooking something. Because again, you know, it's good to know your enemy before you get there. Let's see. Limited swamp stuff, as you do. Oh, was it this one? No. Okay. We did all this, we did all this, we've already seen all this before. Oh yeah, this is probably the fastest Barbatimo rush so far. It was literally just send out Joseph and steamroll. Which it ended up working out specifically due to Battler Shields in this case. It was a combination of Battler Shields and then the, I think it was Dancer's Bracelet, something like that. You know, as you do. It's a pretty powerful combination for cavalry and such. But one charge, one smash through, get the medallion, immediately throw that medallion back on them. At which point, for some reason, I decided to go do multiplayer mode with the fighter squad some more. That's a whole other story. We'll get to that later. There were a few wins that the Pikeman squad ended up getting, though. This is one of the ace squads that I was technically retooling from the multiplayer, because they originally had a feather staff that wasn't allowed at the moment. They're currently banned. But if you actually have a bunch of pikemen and a bunch of... it was 3 pikemen, fox, and a support of some description. The idea was to have 2 power belts on those pikes. Most of the time, heals and resurrections from the cleric are enough to actually keep them operating and kind of self-raising back up to 1 health. They typically would lose their first engagement, but then the second one, they would go get all their health back, and if they ended up potentially losing somebody, they could just life aid back. It was a very, very kind of hard-to-put-down squad, which... it's my favorite kind of thing. The Fox was mostly there for the purpose of technical wins, due to the fact that they could evade a whole bunch and throw out a lot of poison. Personally, I don't like using Foxes very much because they kind of freak me out. It's a slight bit too furry for my taste, but damn, it's a good unit. Let's see, found a better pincer maneuver to go deal with this annoying thief here. It's not like he steals a crazy amount of money, it's only like 300, but look, we can't let that stand, you know? It's the principle of the thing. Anyway, feed some kills to the Lobies, as you do. Go take on some mercenaries by just annihilating their entire operation, as you do. Let's see... I think, was this when we started getting more shields and such? I don't know, probably not. Went around collecting things, again, as you do, not even thinking about taking on the Scarlet fight early. At some point, somebody showed me a clip of the fact that you could somehow not save Scarlet at all. I don't know how that's done, but I'm trying to figure it out blind. Also, we get the Horny Hunchback, as you do. One of the big game changers if you decide to go deal with that whole self-effacing sorcerer situation. Actually, just throwing her at the front of a cab squad would generally do the job just as well as Joseph there. But in their case, obviously, she shuts stuff down as well. So it's kind of up to you. It allows for a bit more of a backup plan in that situation. But after the absolute humiliation with Melisandre there, what I decided to do was go do the sigil. Again, like, Selvi is kind of the MVP of a lot of these kind of situations here. Opening up, just basically opening up the ability to infinitely retool your people as much as you'd like. What's funny is that normally I hate using stuff like this in any RPG whatsoever. It's just weirdly satisfying to see that clear time of, like, only a few seconds, you know? But especially after what happened that first time, it created this idea of wanting to stick around and maybe do this a couple times, get that renown score up, get a few more bits and pieces. But specifically, it was seeing that little rock on the right side of the screen there, that core site rock, that made me want to actually completely start doing this. See, every time that you re-roll a sigil, or every time that you complete a sigil, you end up getting all the drops from your overworld cities and such. Now, I'd gone and tried to fix as many as I could, but quartzite rocks were a pain in the neck to track down and get additional spawns for. However, due to the fact that I had people spawn there, or I had people guarding those locations, they would end up giving more quartzite rocks whenever this was happening. So effectively, it just seemed like, well, we could go build up more towns to get more resources, to get even more resources, if we just sit here and just kind of deal with this a little bit. And thankfully, unlike Fire Emblem or something like that, we're in a place where it's not necessarily going to completely over-level us or anything. It's just going to allow the lobies to catch up. And this is my favorite kind of level cap. It's the same way that training was handled over in Tactics Ogre Reborn, though I find it incredibly funny to this day that so many people were bitching about it because it was called a level cap, and here there is a level cap, but they don't call it a level cap, so nobody calls it a level cap. And nobody's been complaining about it as far as I can tell. It's just, it's funny to me how a couple of words caused so much vitriol from people. Like, oh my god, they took away my freedom, I can't grind! And then here it's like, no, there's still a level cap. We just didn't call it a level cap. Like, oh, this is great, this is amazing. What you gonna do? I swear, people developing RPGs are a special breed, because that is the type of crowd you will never make happy. No matter what you do, somebody's gonna be pissed. Anyway, whatever. So yeah. At this point, I was thinking, like, maybe the team's ready to go take on more stuff, but then figured, I might as well get paid to go maybe deal with these axes or something like that. So yeah, you get paid to eat in this universe. We take our free coupon, go get fed. Obviously, I took the main squad there, tried to up their numbers a little bit. Also brought along Selvi, because they deserve a treat for essentially giving the entire party infinite resources forever. Yeah, the stuff looks dang good. And I find it really funny that there was an interview done in which it's the same guy that made the food hyper-realistic that also made the bouncy boobs. Just, specifically, they weren't even the one that drew it. They were just the ones that made it move around. Oh, man. Anyway. Alright, so what were we doing here? I think we were just going and doing this stuff. Yeah, I think we were just going and sniping through all this stuff a little bit. Okay, one more little kind of unsung thing that I want to point out. Warriors on a run like this become dramatically more valuable. There's one trick that was kind of occasionally useful on a normal playthrough, but on an Iron Man run I found really handy, and in a pinch you can use archers for this as well. But basically any field damaging move does cause a unit to stop spawning reinforcements until you get the full circle. So basically, like, it just basically makes them skip a spawn cycle there. And if you can accomplish it at a point cost of 1, whether you use Mercenaries, whether you use Wild Swing, whether you use Arrow Rain, one way or another, it creates essentially it's a way to make fights more consistent. And in an Iron Man run, it's a lot more of a focus on consistency rather than hyper-optimization. Because a hyper-optimized team, again, if you're relying too much on one particular kind of unit, if there is no redundancy, in a normal playthrough you just reset because that was unfair, how could they do that? But in this case, where you have to accept that unfairness, it could lead to a lot of just a lot of adaptation, as it were. It's like if Joseph's squad is here, that's why we went. That was part of the reason that we went and did the sigil stuff. Where we would still have, for example, our flying squad that could go back up as cavalry. That we could just have them retreat, turn back into cavalry rather than flyers, and maybe have just as much speed, if not more so. If something happened to one of our support squads, we have additional kind of units that we could put out to go replace them. There was just, again, this thought on redundancy to make stuff happen a bit more that way. Anyway, this fight, while we couldn't just send Fran in because they would have gotten completely ruined, just getting access to the healing rain off of this thingy over here does basically make the thing more or less free anyway. You can have Adele take the conversation as the first action, use whatever your A squad is to just carve through the center, and then as soon as you take that thing, whatever flyers you've gotten to the front can infinitely retry and just break down Mr. Foodman, and then you're all set. But obviously it's important to go remember to go rob the golden level up fruit from these randos in the woods. Why not, you know? Free level ups, aka make Joseph even stronger, though realistically, for the most part, he just gets additional defense. But whatever, his number go up, so once we end up getting a hold of a mirror, then we'll be able to maybe switch him to something a bit more offensive, because I feel like his class doesn't necessarily need much more defense. It's pretty darn bulky as is, but whatever, the dude is a brick wall, so that's nice anyway. Ultimately, it takes a few runs of these particular flyers to make this happen. The other flyers end up arriving after multiple attempts and getting thrown backwards. We end up throwing that empowering on there. It makes a slight difference. Obviously, they're limited in terms of their numbers, but ultimately the A squad, not quite the A squad, but the backup A squad ends up showing up and doing the bird thing. And then we move on to try and one-shot this guy, which I think we end up being just barely short. I tried re-rolling it a few times, didn't end up happening. We get this manlet fight. Manlets, I feel, are way stronger in TZ. Like, I don't know how the thresholds are going exactly, but they definitely have tipped a lot more fights than they did in Expert, in my opinion, so that's a weirdly specific but interesting change. I know that I plan to use those a decent bit more often going forward, because it felt like past the intro, they just kind of dropped off in Expert. Not completely, there were still the occasional moments, but I feel like there was far more kind of barricade tech on experts, and I feel like manlets are a bit more important in this one, just because they're going to kind of batter down your barricades and come for you anyway, whereas manlets really let you survive a lot more than you otherwise would, so it could potentially be a nice little kind of a field version of toughness or something like that. But again, we'll see how that ends up playing out. Oh, shoot, it didn't actually show the end of this run. Well, it's good. I guess it's looping. I guess it ran out of videos to show. Anyways, though, so that's about all I really wanted to show here. So I'm hoping maybe some of y'all will consider giving this rule set a bit of a try. I thought it was a hell of a lot of fun. Again, it's unlike many of the ones that I've seen out there. It seems like it's generally if there's any game that can do an Iron Man run and it actually makes it feel different, generally it does tend to change quite a bit of things in your favor. Like it tends to make everything feel very, very different. Like I know some of my favorite runs of New Vegas were those Iron Man runs. Just those feelings where, yeah, like you can get hyper overpowered, but if you have to think about how quickly things can turn away in your favor, or can turn away against your favor, it really does change quite a bit. So anyways, give it a bit of a try. Again, rule set is fairly simple to follow. You see a game over screen, you delete that save file. Personally, what I did was I made a save file that, like, just after that initial tutorial section. So you just complete the unicorn ring, and oh, hello there, traffic cone. How rude of you to show up. Where are you? Click on the play button. There we go. Now it's showing stuff. So I basically had it save right after the unicorn thing. However, about a second after you start it, when you go into your deploy menu, they have yet another really lengthy tutorial. I would recommend that's the moment that you save, so you don't have to go through that bullshit every time you reset. Initially, I was thinking that it made sense to go do all of the tutorial island stuff, so you get your golden egg, you get all of your stuff, go sell the golden egg, all of that kind of thing. Ultimately ended up deciding against that, because there's actually different potential uses for that stuff that you may want to do at different times. So ultimately, yeah, just that particular intro is where I decided to kind of leave my restart save. I just put it on slot 0, and then every time that it's you know, a dead run, we just go load up that save and save over the 1-2 slots away. So that's about that. You know, hopefully it helps. Y'all have yourselves a good one. And yeah, in general, I feel like TZ mode is exactly as difficult as it ever could have been. feels like almost one-to-one difficulty-wise, similar to the kinds of snowballs back and forth that you see in something like XCOM 2. And yeah, that's pretty good. So yeah, obviously this is still fairly early, haven't gotten into the ultra late game or something, but based on what I've seen from the ultra late game, it is going to be a chaotic shit show of difficulty. So actually, you know what? That's actually one more thing. I never see the ramp up discussed very much. That it seems to be like, oh, it's too easy to snowball, but like even on expert, once you got into those later fights, you could very easily, like any squad by itself was screwed. Like if your counter squad ended up getting steamrolled, and it's however many support squads you sent out to support it, you could very easily see everything crumble apart. Like it again, there's a lot of rolling back and forth that I don't see get discussed as much. Like yeah, you can do infinity billion damage, and then you get suddenly ambushed by a sudden support fire squad that they're weak to, and then what? Because like the angel squads in Albion love to sneak up behind you and retake towers. You got the Bestrels that love to hide in the woods or that show up in crazy numbers to just overwhelm something with sheer force. There, they end up getting free priority attacks during the night, as well as if they ever get a numbers advantage, that team is just steamrolled. Again, I don't see that stuff come up in those difficulty discussions. And as far as I'm seeing from the arena, yeah, the adjustments got made. Stuff's banned in general. As far as somebody cheesing their way through the whole thing for free stuff, it would take them like a week to afford things. So I'm not really sure that actually would be something that many folks would go for. So I don't know. I don't know. Hard to say. Hard to say. Anyway, that's about that. Give it a shot. Y'all have yourselves a good one, and take care.